So our agenda item identifies Jess Larson, but is it Allie who's here to present for us? Oh no, Jess is there. Oh, you're on my screen too. I apologize. Hi there. Welcome, thank you. And I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Allie and I will both be jointly presenting. Is there a PowerPoint that your staff has ready to go, or should we be bringing that PowerPoint ourselves?
Why don't you go ahead and bring it up?
Okay, let me do that. That'll just take a moment. How is that for visibility on your end?
Good.
Great for me.
Okay, great. Allie, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Allie Alexander Sheridan. I'm a program coordinator on our supportive housing services team. I work with Jess and we'll be presenting this together. So I'll go ahead and jump in. So we are bringing you an implementation update on our supportive housing services program and giving you an update on all that we've achieved since visiting you, I believe, in spring of this year. Next slide. So just as a bit of background and refresher on the SHS measure, so this measure was approved by voters in May of 2020 with 58% support. And it was really conceived by a broad coalition of community partners. Many of you may be in the room today. And it has been referred and overseen by our Metro government. And really the goal of this measure is to achieve functional zero for folks experiencing chronic homelessness across the region. And also as a reminder, this is a regional measure. So Clackamas County and Multnomah County are our partners in this work as well. So what functional zero means for folks experiencing chronic homelessness is when households or individuals experience homelessness, that there is housing and access to a case manager to rapidly respond to their need. And then also one thing to note is that this measure is the largest per capita investment to address these sort of solutions to ending homelessness in the nation to date. Next slide, please. So before we jump into the programmatic updates, we wanted to share a little bit about Dora's story, which also really just speaks to how supportive housing services programming works. And really it's just a timely reminder of why we do this work. So Dora has experienced homelessness for much of her adult life. And most recently, her most recent episode of homelessness began when she lost her mother. And so Dora was connected to one of our bridge shelter sites, which we'll give an update on in a moment, through our Community Connect system, which is our coordinated entry system. And so she entered one of our bridge shelters and was connected with a case manager and an ARLA voucher, which is our rent assistance voucher. And so through our ARLA voucher and assistance with housing navigation and other support services from a case manager, Dora was able to find stable housing. And as of 2 weeks ago, she moved into her apartment. So we're really excited to share Dora's story and just a reminder of the importance of this work and really the outcomes it produces. Next slide. So the Bridge Shelter program is really a foundational piece of one of our early program, or is a foundation in the system that a foundational piece in the system we're building. And it really is designed to respond to the crisis that our community is experiencing and help folks transition to stable housing. And so really the goal is to bridge folks into stable housing. And so our bridge shelters are made possible through the acquisition of hotels purchased with funds through Project Turnkey or the Affordable Housing Bond. And we've added 102 new year-round shelter programs at the 3 sites listed below. Just a note that the Forest Grove Inn is now named Casa de Amparo, so a distinction there. And some of these sites will be redeveloped into permanent supportive housing or affordable housing. And the Aloha Inn specifically will be redeveloped into permanent supportive housing in the spring of next year, and provide 54 permanent supportive housing units for our community. And so these bridge shelter sites are equipped with case managers to really support folks as they move towards stable housing, much like Dora. Next slide. So another program that we've launched is our housing case management program. And this is perhaps the biggest and most transformative investment that we've made thus far. And so our case managers that we have added to our system in partnership with our community-based organizations are really there to support folks from experiencing homelessness and engaging them, helping them navigate housing, and support them beyond being housed as long as they need that support. And so this is made possible through the partnership with 17 of our community-based organizations. And with this capacity of adding these case managers, we will be able to support 800 households experiencing chronic homelessness throughout the county. And so through this work, this is how we intend to achieve one of our year 1 goals, which is to support 500 households with permanent supportive housing. So another piece of this is our regional long-term rental assistance, or as we like to call it, ARLA. And so this functions much like a Section 8 voucher or a housing choice voucher, if you're familiar with those. And so this is designed to be locally flexible, and participants take this with the assistance of their case managers and are able to rent an apartment out on the open market. And so this ensures permanent housing by bridging the gap between folks with low income and the cost for rent on the market. And so it's important to notice that all folks that have access to case managers will also have access to this ARLA voucher to support them into permanent supportive housing. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Jess.
Thank you, Allie. Good evening again, Mayor Gibson, councilors. My name for the record is Jess Larson. I use she and her pronouns, and I work with Allie in the Department of Housing Services at Washington County. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. So carrying on this presentation with an implementation update for you all after basically 3 months of program implementation. The next sort of chapter of this update is regarding some of the systems and equity investments we're making to wrap around those programmatic investments to make sure the system is strong or strengthened and able to support all of that important programmatic work and all those new boots on the ground. So one of those things is investing in our culturally specific organizations. We've made a commitment for all culturally specific organizations contracting with the county under the new supportive housing services program. We will invest $50,000 in them each year for 3 years to help build out that capacity as an organization so they can bring more culturally specific services to our community. So that's one first equity investment we've made. We've also built a really robust training program that will ultimately be available through an online portal for all of the new case managers who are being hired up through the programs that Allie was describing, and all the case managers who are already here and need to kind of brush up on their skills. So these these trainings include Behavioral Health 101, culturally specific services, trauma-informed care, housing navigation, basic skills, and more. It's a very long list, but there's just a lot of training that's being put in place to help build out a strong foundation of all these new case managers. Another component of the system that we've built out is a procurement process. We ran an RFPQ, which stands for Request for Programmatic Qualifications. And it was sort of like a big, wide open door to invite organizations to express their interest to contract with the county for the provision of a wide array of supportive housing services. And through that process, last spring, we qualified 38 organizations, many of whom are already under contract with us. And we're about to open it again because, in fact, the process was heralded as such an inclusive and accessible process by the community-based organizations who applied, that our partners in Multnomah County and Clackamas County have asked to join in, and we will be doing this in a coordinated tri-county fashion to make it even more accessible for organizations who are working in multiple counties, for example. And then last, as you heard Dora's story, Community Connect is a very important throughput in our system. That's where people get referred to. It's often a phone number, and that is like the intake line, if you will, to help get connected to refer to housing services. And because our system was so bare, if you will, before the supportive housing services investment made possible by voters, we've had roughly a 2-week wait for folks who are being referred to the system. And oftentimes that assessment was a very long phone call because the case manager needed to collect all the possible information before they were referred on to a program. And now with so many more case managers and community-based partners in this system with us, we have many more doors of entry, and we've restructured the entire referral system so that basically we can boil it down to a 20-minute assessment to help connect that participant to the very next level of the help, and so they can keep moving through the system as efficiently as possible to ensure they get a quick placement and as quick of a placement as possible into shelter or a housing program. So this is a very wordy slide, and I'll just leave it with you, and you can refer to it as you're interested and ask any questions at the end of our presentation. But essentially what we mean to convey here is that all of these new investments, all of this work is accountable to regional outcome metrics. We are going to be measured based on what our impact is in the community. And there are a few ways in which we're doing that concretely. So these are the 5 primary regional outcome metrics that we will be measuring on. And I'll just walk you through a couple quickly. Like programmatic inflow outflow, that's basically measuring the number of people who called Community Connect and how they got sent on along the way. And last quarter, 843 households called and got assessed through the system. 278 of those households were assisted, most primarily with emergency rent assistance, because you're well aware of the emergency rental housing needs for many households, whereas 393 of the households exited with no help and 172 continue to wait for help. So you get that sense of a lot of people are waiting for supports, and we haven't had ample supports to offer them. It's also important to mention in this slide, really these outcomes from last quarter don't reflect all these new investments that Ali was describing in the programs, because we're just hiring up the case managers. We're just training them. The boots are just starting to hit the streets of Washington County. So we expect in future quarters and in future updates, we're going to see that programmatic inflow start to really flow and more people to get access to housing programs. Another one I'll draw your eye to is housing placements. One of the kinds of very important housing placements is permanent supportive housing. Ali was describing that with Dora's story. You see above in the system capacity that we actually know that 885 households need permanent supportive housing in our community, but we only currently have 394 placements. And that's why last quarter, only 6 households were actually placed into permanent supportive housing, because there's so much more need than there is capacity. And again, as we add those 500 ARLA vouchers and all those new housing case managers, we expect to see more system capacity and more housing placements every quarter. And I'll just jump to the last one, returns to homelessness. This is how we measure our effectiveness. Does housing stick? Do people stay placed in housing? And in fact, we have good news here because we know the work works. When people get placed into housing, the vast majority of our participants in our programs do not return to homelessness, and only about 5% do. So we hope to continue on that great work as we expand the capacity and the ability to create more housing placements in future quarters and years ahead. I see a question. Should I pause now for questions or finish up? I have just a couple more slides, at your pleasure.
Micah, if you want to, if it's pertinent, yeah, go. Do you want to wait, or did you have a comment now?
I actually didn't have a comment. I must have accidentally bumped it.
Oh, all right.
Sorry.
No problem. Carrying on then. So this is a depiction, just a simple kind of image to capture how significantly our homeless and housing system of care is growing because of the voter-approved supportive housing services measure. So in the first pie chart on the upper left-hand side, we are reflecting sort of the system that has been for a very long time in Washington County. It's a combination of federal funding, state funding, and some local county general fund, and the safety levy that voters in Washington County have approved. And so that amounts to about $10 to $11 million annually, and that's kind of been our baseline. Then, recently we've had a lot of additional federal investments because of the pandemic in response to COVID. And many of those investments have come specifically to serve, to meet housing and homelessness needs in our community. And that's specifically $8 million that have been added. So almost doubling that system. And as you know, it's been hard to get those resources out to the door because we have a small community of prepared and of ready community organizations to help funnel that money into the community. And that's why we're spending so much work building a strong foundation, because we're going to be growing so much more in the coming years. The first annual projected revenue for the first fiscal year for this year is $52 million from SHS. So we'll be growing from roughly 11 million to 60 to $63 million this year, and continuing from there. So it's a very significant scaling up, and also it brings significant hope in the impact that we're going to be able to have in our community to meet this ongoing need of supportive housing. And looking ahead, so so far we've reported on what we got done so far in our first quarter, and looking ahead to this coming quarter, we've already got some new programmatic work underway. We are looking to bring on a permanent partner to operate the Aloha Inn as a permanent supportive housing building. So right now it's temporarily hosting a bridge shelter program in half the building. But as Ali was describing, later this spring, we will have 54 permanent supportive housing placements there. And then we're hoping to expand even more permanent supportive housing in all the various affordable housing buildings throughout the county, many of which have been made possible by way of the Regional Affordable Housing Bond. There are about 1,500 units under development right now in the pipeline, and as many as we can, we hope to set aside hopefully 500 of those units dedicated to serve this highest need priority of our community, people who are recovering from homelessness through permanent supportive housing. HPAC, the next item on this slide, is the Homeless Plan Advisory Committee, and it's our community advisory body that helps inform the implementation of our homeless programs. And as we grow from about an $11 million program to about a $63 million program and more, we need to also grow the work of HPAC to bring many more relevant issues and policy guidance to that table to inform and improve the effectiveness of our programming as we grow throughout the next few years. So more to come on HPAC. And then last here is just a quick note on the winter shelter program that just opened this Monday. It will be open for 4 months through March 15th. We've done winter shelter every year in Washington County, and it's been changing a lot in recent years. Last year, it expanded because of one-time funding available through the federal COVID expansion dollars. And before that, it was pretty much a revolving shelter from one church or faith community to the next over the course of the week. And what we've been able to do now that we have stable supportive housing funding for our winter shelter program is we've fully funded 24-hour shelters at these three centers, and then a variety of what we call non-congregate or motel kind of rooms for families and medically vulnerable households. And so between those different programs, we have 187 winter shelter beds that have just opened this week and will stay open through March 15th, really focus on saving life during the harshest winter months. And as you know, our goal, well, actually, that's the next slide. Our goal, it's buried here. Our goal is to achieve 250 year-round shelter beds. We don't want to just have shelter 4 months a year. We want to have shelter capacity all year round to really help people use it as a stabilizing resource that connects them into housing. But in order to do that, we need sites identified and purpose-built and created for shelter year-round. And so we will use our winter shelter sites this time again, this year again, but our goal is to identify a handful of sites throughout the county to operate those permanent shelter programs. And some other goals, well, the good news is, and Ali sort of mentioned this with the bridge shelter program and the housing case management program, we're on our way to meeting two of our most important year one goals, the 500 supportive housing placements and 100 new year-round shelter beds. We're also working to support an additional 500 households who need one-time assistance or short-term rent assistance because they're experiencing kind of economic related housing instability. And programmatically, once the program grows to its full capacity, we expect to scale up to an additional 1,665 supportive housing placements. So lots of growth to come, and those 250 year-round shelter beds I mentioned. And of course, all of this work is committed to and will be measuring in our outcomes to make sure that in each of our housing placements and all of the households that we help sustain through stable housing, that we are advancing racial equity in our community. So I think that's the end of our presentation. We'll be happy to take your questions now.
Wow. Jess and Ali, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I have to say, it is promising and uplifting, and it's good to kind of see all of the movement. I was really shocked on behalf of the council. Right before COVID, I was on the kind of regional task force, and I was shocked at the amount of ground that the warming, the emergency winter shelters, it just baffled my mind how far people had to travel from day to day and to get there by a certain amount of time, and what were they going to do with their things. And I always thought it would be a really wonderful idea to have, city leaderships have to do that trek in one day to kind of learn about the kind of homelessness and at the time. And I'm very excited to hear that one piece of it has been kind of fixed, and so much more kind of progress is being made. So kudos to you guys and all the hard work and everything that everyone else is doing. Does anyone have questions or comments for Jess or Ali?
I'll just say it's outstanding, and their efforts really they're getting some real well-deserved recognition. Articles in the Oregonian and the Portland Tribune recognizing this effort and the successes that have taken place. So Jen and you guys have just done an outstanding job, and it's much appreciated. So this is the second time I've heard the presentation this week, but it's all good.
Well, unless anyone else has any comments or questions, we applaud you and we thank you for sharing this with us tonight. And you are of course welcome to stay on our meeting, but we will also say goodnight to you if you happen to take off. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. See you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Forward to it.
Thank you.
All right. So now is time for our open forum. At this time, the council will be happy to receive comments pertaining to items on the agenda, including questions, suggestions, complaints, and items for the future. Each person's time will be limited to 3 minutes. I actually didn't see that we have a single participant today, do we? I think it's
We
only-
do, we have 6. So if anybody in the attendees column, if you would like to
Okay, do we have any public comments?
raise your hand, so I know you guys are interested in doing a public comment.
Oh, I see, attendees. I see now. Apologies to our participants for not seeing you. I had to.
I want to explain how they can raise their hand, Ronnie.
Okay, if you go on the bottom of your screen and there's some raise your hand, just hit that. Or you can leave a comment in the chat box. All right, since I don't see anything, I do have an email that was emailed to me for public comment time.
Okay.
So, Mrs. President, if you would like me to read that.
Yes, please read. Thank you.
Okay, it says, Ronnie, regarding the no parking block on 116th Avenue in front of Building 1 and Building 2, King City Building Apartments, my concern is the following. I would like the King City Council to designate the lower half of the said block to be assigned apartment residents only parking. Due to the new street widening, the lane changes, and the no parking designation on the first block of 116th, that the 3 apartment residents in the building number 1 now have no available parking spaces. As we already have to compete with apartment residents from down the street on Beef Bend Road for parking on our block, I would like the city council to consider designating the lower half of the block for apartment residents parking only. Otherwise, the other apartment residents down the street will take the spaces. They sometimes park their cars on the block for days at a time. I would like to thank the city council for their kind consideration on this matter and your continued concern for the well-being. End of email.
Thank you, Ronnie. You know, I think we all recall we've kind of spoken to this issue quite a lot over the last couple of months. We went and took a look at it, and we have tried hard to work with the owners and managers of that apartment complex. And it's difficult when you don't have parking right where you expect or want your parking to be, but right, we can't guarantee everyone's parking is right there in front of them, and really property owners, especially of residential properties, they really bear the responsibility of providing parking for their for their tenants. So I think while we will kind of continue, at least this is my opinion, right? I think we continue to kind of monitor and always see kind of how we can mitigate the changes that we need to make for safety. You know, we knew they were going to lose some parking. There is parking just a few feet down, and unfortunately, I think the situation, at least for now, is just what it is, right? I think, and Mike, the last update we got was the property owners didn't want to accept our offer of kind of taking a portion away of the egress there to create more parking there. Is that correct?
Yeah, they weren't very receptive to that idea. We have identified 2 spots, one both at the corner closest to King George and 116th, to designate both of those handicap spaces.
Right.
So it'll be a handicap space as you turn toward the west on King George, and as you're headed south on 116th, as you approach the King George intersection, there'd be a parking spot right there on 116th that would be handicap as well. So we are adding those 2 spots back
Right.
We still have a net loss of parking spots. I think we have a net loss of about 3 or 4 parking spots. We thought we could accommodate those with the pullout if the apartment owner would have been cooperative, but so far they haven't been receptive or cooperative with us on that. So,
and I think this is, and Shauna, I see, I know you have a question or a comment. I'll send it to you in a second. I think, you know, the city is always going to have a commitment to safety first. That just is the responsibility of the city. And while frustrating, residential issues within either HOAs or apartment complexes or whatnot, those issues are really between tenants and their landlord. And so I would really encourage, if any of the tenants of any of the apartment complexes around there, I really encourage them to kind of get together and try to address this collectively with their landlords and with the management companies of the properties. And candidly, they'll probably get much more movement on this issue than we ever possibly could. And so, right, in King City, as far as we're concerned, right, everyone has a right to parking everywhere because it's city streets, and we can't, right, other than designating for handicapped, right, it really is kind of a responsibility of the property. So I commiserate with those residents, and I encourage them to collectively band together and see what movement they can get on their end. Shauna, how you had raised, oh, sorry, Ken.
Yes.
No, just before Shauna, Mike, can you just real quickly explain what the proposal was that we sent to that owner?
sure. We proposed that we were going to build parking spots. I think there was 4 spots there in a pull-out style. It was going to have no impacts to their buildings. We were going to put some ADA access there. And it was in the grass. So I think there was like 1 light pole that would have needed to be moved. And we were prepared to do that as part of the project. I think our engineering estimate was about $30,000 to do it. So that was a $30,000 project that the city was offering to do, and he rejected our.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Very unfortunate.
I think that's important. I'm sorry, Shauna. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mike.
First of all, I want to ask Mike a question. Isn't there a designated parking area along 131st that is permit parking only or resident parking only for those newer apartments there on the west side of 131st? There's a sign that says residential parking or parking by permit only.
No.
Mike, she's talking about the Highlands that we did one in 2017.
No, she's talking about on 131 and
that too. Well, sure. The Highlands.
I believe the sign first is meant for the actual parking lot for the apartment complex, not for the street.
And there is a sign earlier, there's a bump out location for parking. And
Right.
what that is for no commercial. So it's residential only, no commercial overnight parking. Because what we had earlier was some like landscaping trucks and utility vehicles of residents in the neighborhood would park their commercial vehicles in there. So we put that sign up to kind of do that. The Highlands, candidly, is a little bit different because the Highlands parking issue and the permitting, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that was wrapped into their annexation, and that it was an issue. It was a long-standing issue and kind of I don't want to say a barrier to annexation, but it was an issue because of the overflow of the Deer Creek parking into the Highlands. And so the Highland HOA for years had been very frustrated with Deer Creek parents parking there, running across the street that was unsafe because we didn't have a crossing, and then running back. And so to my knowledge, KCCA, prior to kind of us, and the Highlands is the only registered parking. is there one HOA in the KCCA that has parking permits? I can't recall.
Well, I would love to share my with the rest of you, if that's okay.
Sure.
I feel like
a point of order. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm wondering if we need to go and add this to the agenda, as we don't have discussion about this on our agenda for tonight.
Because it was open, because it was brought into open forum, we're not allowed to do it under the discussion of the open forum.
I don't know that there is discussion under open forum. I think it's just an opportunity for people to
Comment.
their comments. But I think we need to continue talking about it, but I really want to make sure that we're transparent about what we're talking about in our meetings.
Yeah.
So I want to, I don't know if we need to add it as new business. If someone wants to make a motion to amend the agenda.
I would love to make a motion to amend the agenda. I think this is really important, and I feel like we're completely ignoring these members of our community that have reached out to us many times. And I think this is a really important issue that we need to address. And if they're having a problem with people that aren't living in King City parking right in front of their places and they can't park there, then we should help them with that. And if that means we have to get permit parking.
We need a motion, please.
Shauna motioned, I seconded.
Is there a second?
You want to vote, please?
Okay, so the motion is to modify the agenda to allow for this discussion to take place now. We had a motion and a second. Everyone who is in favor, please say aye.
Jamie, you need to call
your hand.
Call for discussion on the motion.
Okay, I call for a discussion on the motion. Does anyone want to discuss the motion that's on the floor before we move to vote?
Discuss.
I have a question. So we started off talking about parking on 116th. Where are we headed with this? Are we talking about parking throughout the city? Is that where this conversation is going, or what is it we are going to discuss here?
So I can share my opinion. Is it okay if I share my opinion now? Is this the proper
Well,
time?
I'm just trying to figure out what it is we're trying to accomplish with this conversation.
So hold on, so time out everyone. So I think Kate's concern is that we're not following Robert's Rules of Order. And
Right.
Following Robert's Rules of Order, the issue is before we can have discussion on what the topic of the motion actually is, we have to see if there's any discussion or contention about changing the agenda. It didn't sound like there was, but let's just do this in Robert's Rules of Order. So the motion is to allow for this discussion by amending the agenda to add this discussion to the agenda. Is that clear? So if everyone—
No, it's not clear because I don't know what the discussion is. What is the discussion?
Any discussion whatsoever, because that's what Kate is saying, is that there's no discussion allowed in the agenda because this all has come up during public forum where there isn't a point of discussion. So she is suggesting we stop talking in total.
No.
No? Okay, go ahead.
So we all know that we need to talk about the parking, and this came up because of public comment, but there is no agenda item to talk about parking. So Shauna wants to add an agenda item so we can talk about parking and have it on the agenda and have a discussion and have everything nice and lined up. Because what we have to do is get the habit of having a public comment, and then we go off on a tangent about the public comment, and then we hear another. We have to either hear it and just hear it, and that's it, and add it to the agenda next time, or hear it and amend the agenda and say we are going to talk about this today. So I think right now Mayor had a question about what is it that we're adding, and I believe Shauna's motion was to amend the agenda to add an item talking about parking on 116th Street.
Correct.
Avenue. And I seconded
Okay,
that
but
motion.
I thought Shauna said 131st, so that's
No,
She's asking a question about that, yeah. And so I seconded, and then if anybody wants to talk about adding it to the agenda, we can do that, and if they don't, we vote, and then life goes on.
Right.
Well done, Kate.
Okay. So there is a motion on the floor. Raise your hand if you approve the motion to add the discussion of parking, discussing parking on 116. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3.
Oh, okay. So I mean, yeah, as long as
Yeah.
we're talking about 116.
Okay, the motion carries. Okay, so now Shauna, please share your thoughts with us.
Is that,
Should we save it for new business? You get to make the call. You're running the meeting.
Technically, you should be adding it to new business under 6 point
Or 7, isn't it 7 point something? I don't know.
something. Hold on.
Okay, or I can take a motion to move the item now and rearrange the agenda since we're all sitting here talking about it. So does anyone want to move it so that we talk about it now?
yes, let's just talk
Okay.
about it. Move on.
Second.
Okay, is all in favor? Raise your hand. All right. Okay, so now it is appropriately been moved and we may now proceed.
Awesome. Thank you. I think it's really important to protect these most vulnerable members of our community that have come to us many, many times over this issue. All I'm suggesting is that we as a council make a decision to put a sign up there that it's permit parking only. I can't imagine that we don't have the power to do that. And then to provide permit parking for those people that live in that apartment. That way it would block all those people that live in another community from coming over into King City and parking there, because that seems to be the issue. Obviously some parking spots have been taken away, and we're kind of at a standstill with the apartment complex on how to fix that. But I think there's an immediate need for these people, and I would like to be able to help them if we can. That's all.
I think my only concern is, one, how do we know the people parking there are not from our community? And then 2, how do we create a parking program? I mean, if we create a parking program for just this pocket, does that then the greater discussion is all of King City, right? Because eventually everyone's going to want parking permits for all communities, right?
Well, I mean, if we're doing it in the Highlands and then we say no to these people, then that's not equitable. And I have a problem with that.
Can I just chime in really quick? Because first off, I think this is a bad policy to get ourselves into, this whole parking enforcement concept as a whole. For our citizens pay sheriff taxes but the roads are paid for through fuel taxes, and everybody in the state of Oregon pays those fuel taxes. Everybody has a right to access on public roads, and everybody has a right to park on those parking spots. If we start limiting it, we're going to end up getting ourselves in a pickle where I see we end up losing funds from public agencies. We just got $150,000 from ODOT to do that road. That road is newly paved. That's all state and federal funds. Like, those aren't our taxpayer dollars that are paying for those roads. So I just want to be clear on that. And so these are not private roads. These are public roads, and you're trying to limit, and all we're doing is exacerbating a problem that doesn't exist.
Well, I'm thank you for that. I'm confused about why the Highlands has a different situation. Are they private roads?
So the Highlands has a different situation because it was a safety issue about the people crossing the main road there at the Highlands, parking for Deer Creek Elementary, blocking the driveways of residents. Ernie can attest to this. Ernie got tons of calls of people not being able to leave their houses, and with we would assume that most of those people leaving didn't have an emergency, but you are talking about a 55 and older community. So blocking access out or in, right, is a safety issue. But really the biggest concern was causing the traffic issue to cross the road. And that, I think it wasn't that we prefer the Highlands and therefore we're going to let you have permits. It was, this had to resolve the safety issue. Here we took federal and state tax dollars to address a safety issue. And candidly, while I really sympathize with these people, this really is a landlord tenant issue, right? I mean, I don't, I guess I'm failing to see the connection to, as a city, why we, other than having empathy for our citizens, why this is a city issue. I guess that would be my point.
Yes, because we took away their parking. That's why it's a city issue, because the city made that
Take away-
decision.
Well, we moved their parking. We took away a couple spots of parking, but
That's
they
why it's,
parking.
No, well, we didn't take away their parking. Listen, this is the way it has to be stated. We addressed a safety issue. That's why that project is going on. It was an unsafe situation to begin with. And some of the residents will tell you that when they did park on that road and people would turn that corner, there was a potential tearing the door off the car. So the turn lane and those safety issues are important to the safety concern that we have on that street. That's why the project is done to begin with. So we didn't take away their parking, we fixed the safety issue. The obligation to provide parking, we will always try to do whatever we can to make parking available on public streets. But the reality of it is the city is doing what we can to say, look, work with us landlord so that we can provide a safe environment to have a few cars parked there. And we need, I believe, that we need to continue working to that end to try to do what is a safe, inexpensive option to this problem. It is not permitting parking places that fixes this problem, in my opinion.
Well, we did offer a $30,000 fix, and the landlord, it is a private property, and they declined. But who else wants to jump in here? Because I don't want to take up,
Yeah, Mike coming up.
Go ahead, Mike.
I just want to talk really quick about the Highlands, just to give you some history on that. With the Highlands, that was portion of an agreement that we negotiated to kind of entice the Highlands to annex into the city. So that was tax revenues that the city wouldn't have had before. In getting them here, then we could use that to administer a program. We did a 6-month look at that to see if it was actually necessary. Most of the council, and still to this day, does not believe that that's necessary. We have a non-existent problem of so-called parking in the suburbs. We really don't have a problem. You just might have to walk a little bit further. So secondly, my second point is, sorry to hop here, but my second point is that if there's a parking problem with an apartment complex, that's the landlord's problem. The landlord needs to step up and provide more parking for their residents. It shouldn't be falling on the city's shoulders to administer parking programs and go out and use city resources to provide parking for these residents.
Dave?
We got Dave Platt. I don't want to just drag this out, but I think there's a misconception as to what was requested and what actually happened in the Highlands. And there were two potential problems that were placed on the table, if you will. One was the development of the property just south on 131st and just south of the Highlands. And some of the property owners within the Highlands had a great deal of concern because Fisher Road, or not Fisher, Dixon was originally pretty much a private street. There was it didn't access anything but the Highlands. And so they were concerned about additional traffic. And just as a matter of fact, there has never developed the problem that was imagined in that area. The other problem had to do with the Deer Creek School. live almost right across the street from Deer Creek. And we have people that park in our cul-de-sac and on our streets and down Beachville every day during school. And it was never our intent to force the parents to park someplace else when there wasn't anywhere else to park. The concern that we had was the safety at the corner of Beachvale and 131st. And so our agreement with the city when we were annexed was that we would paint the curb red on one side of the street, so parking on both sides of Beachvale, entering and exiting 131st was not allowed. You could only park on one side, which opened that up. The other thing that was done that we were very interested in seeing take place was the traffic light and traffic control that was put in, and that went through, as you probably all know, a couple of generations, because the county didn't want to do it because it was too close to the corner of Deep Bend and 131st, and on and et cetera, et cetera. And so when King City got control of 131st, then we went ahead and took care of that problem with the light. And so the safety problem that existed previously at Beachvale and 131st has been largely alleviated. We still have parents parking down the streets within the Highlands. It's public streets. I don't, Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
That definitely sounds familiar. It was the concern about the houses and apartment complexes going in south there. We weren't sure how much traffic or parking that was going to generate. We weren't sure what the final outcome and look of Dixon's connection to 131st was going to be. And so those were all part of the negotiations that we considered as part of the annexation, and just to put fears to rest, essentially, that there was going to be a parking problem. The council agreed to take so I think it was like a 6 or 12 month look at it and see if it was actually necessary. And I don't think we ever went back to revisit it because it wasn't a problem. It was a non.
So is there permit parking in the Highlands, or did that never?
Well,
is there permitted parking in the Highlands?
yes and
They
no.
have their sign. Yeah. It's a self-run.
But not an actual parking permitting program?
The city doesn't enforce it. It's through their HOA.
Oh, I see. So it's the HOA that has a permitting. Okay. So I guess, Shauna, does that address a little bit of the non-equity concerns that you have, and that the permitting for the Highlands is through their HOA and not the city, and it was a unique issue? Or do you still feel, I just want to make sure that you feel heard and that your opinion is getting,
You feel heard. I still have the same opinion.
Sure.
Just saying that the reason that the Highlands got permit parking was for tax reasons, for income for the city, doesn't necessarily make it better, in my opinion. I would love to help our residents that are struggling with this parking situation. I just wish we could come up with a solution that would work, that's a little bit more immediate. Maybe, what about putting up a sign just that says no commercial parking? I mean, I'm not saying that that's a problem. I don't even know if that is a problem there, but maybe that would do something. I mean, if we have signs like that on 131st, then obviously we can put a sign like that there. Maybe that would at least give the residents a little bit of peace of mind and help them a little bit to avoid having a big truck come up and park there and really block a lot of spots. Maybe that's just I'm just trying to think outside the box.
Well, I think maybe what will be good is if we punt this topic to to an agenda item, so that we can kind of, spend a little time talking about it next time. And then maybe in the meantime, Mike, is there what sign, maybe Dave could email around everyone what signs are available to us, if that is an option, what the cost impact is, or,
have we had any problems with commercial vehicles there? Because I don't think we have. It's just residential vehicles that I've seen parked there.
I think what Shauna meant is the sign like we have down here that says residential parking only. That
We were not even able to do that in the Highlands.
All right.
Okay.
And then the other thing, I just want to make it a point. This particular complex that we're talking about, there is parking on the back side. We're only really talking about the folks who park in front for those buildings that are closest to 116. There's actually parking in the back, but that apartment complex has not provided any ADA type ramps. They have stairs that people would have to negotiate with, whether they have a grocery cart or a walker or anything along those lines. That apartment complex has not provided proper ADA type access for its residents. And yet King City now is being portrayed as not hearing the concerns of the people to provide parking on a public street. We have to be careful with how we portray these things, because Jamie kind of said it, that really the apartment complex is responsible for providing parking for their residents. But it's another feature to this where they have not provided ADA type access for those apartments that's on the front side. So those people park on the street to be able to unload, to have a safer egress to their apartment and so on. So it is more to it than just us providing parking in that scenario. So we really need to dig deep and try to figure out how can we negotiate something that we are trying to work with these residents to come up with something. We have taken that first step. We're not ignoring them by any stretch of the imagination, but the ultimate fix is not just putting up a sign. Right. The ultimate fix is trying to figure out how we can make that entire scenario safer, and the owner has to step up and make that happen.
Well, maybe Shauna, right? If you could meet with the residents and see, maybe with your support, you could go to their landlord and have a conversation all together. So, it doesn't, I guess you have empower outside of this process to maybe help them and get some movement there. Cause maybe they're, anyway, that's just my humble suggestion. I think we can certainly put this in an agenda item for another night, but let's go ahead and move on, because we did. And then I think Kate's concerns for transparency and to make sure that we're following procedural rules was a good reminder. So I think maybe, Ronnie or Mike, maybe like an email that maybe, and I'm going to include myself in this, right? Is that maybe we just all need a little refresher of, right, Robert's Rules of Order. And we just need to remember, I do this all the time because I want to respond to public comments, but I think it was a good reminder that for public comments, there isn't any discussion with it. So I think we either need to add discussion to the comments, saying open discussion in the agenda, so that we capture that we might discuss what's brought up at open forum, or we need to remember that it's listening only and to not say anything and punt it to a more appropriate time in the agenda. So Mike and Ronnie, I think if you guys can give us a suggestion on how you want to help just make sure that we stick on procedural tasks like that, maybe.
So I think what we do is, if we have topics like this, one, I'm not prepared to talk about it. So, if I was prepared, I probably could have gone back, reviewed some notes, and then kind of remembered the stuff that David just brought up, but just going off the top of my head from 5-6 years ago, trying to remember all the details of an agreement, I just don't have that at my beck and call right now. So
I think what's hard though is we don't want to stifle either really important conversations that come up as they come, right? So I think there must be some way that we either agree, like it puts you in a position. It also puts the city and all of us as counselors in a precarious position because, right, if we know that eyes are watching us, and if we say something incorrect or we don't recall it properly, or right, we misstate something because we weren't prepared and we're talking off the cuff, I think that is also really important that we kind of steer clear of that. So I mean, my suggestion, and I guess why don't you follow up by email, you and Ronnie, but I think adding just a 5-minute discussion in the public forum in some way as a catch-all, just right, so that in this situation, I think it's a good, if we want to have this discussion, we can have just a quick responsive kind of discussion and then say we aren't prepared to really talk about this fully and we can address it later. But I think it gets rid of that awkward situation that we had for 5 minutes, and I don't think we need to repeat that, right? So
I think if I could, I think it's really efficient if you go through the Roberts rules in the way that they're written, and then you add it to the future agenda as a discussion item. That gives the staff a chance to actually prepare. It gives the council a chance to actually investigate. And then we all come together at the next meeting and we have a frank and candid conversation about what the issue is. Right now, we're all unprepared and we're all shooting from the hip. And also we haven't notified the public that we're going to talk about this issue.
Right.
So no one else in the public has a chance to chime in now.
Right.
So we've robbed them of their opportunity to participate in public conversation. So
all right, so let's do that. Maybe you could Ronnie, could someone recirculate? I mean, I know I'm gonna say everyone go Google, but if we could just recirculate, or maybe Kate, I'm gonna told you to recirculate or circulate to us by email the Roberts Rules of Orders. Let's all review, and then we can procedurally kind of adhere to it better going forward and be prepared when we want to bring up new topics that aren't on the agenda. Agreed, Mike? Is that good? Okay. All right, I'm going to move us along now. So resolution R-2021-11.
Jamie, sorry to interrupt you. You need to do 5 unfinished business for June 2021 financials.
Oh, I'm sorry. I moved to the wrong page. I apologize, everyone. So we are into unfinished business, June 2021 financials. We need to discuss and approve or disapprove of the financials. Let's hear our staff recommendations, and who's going to go, Ronnie or Mike?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So sorry for the confusion at the last meeting when we discussed this item. I was having trouble figuring out how we came to the $722,000 when we only had like $400,000 worth of revenue. And so I was trying to do my math and it wasn't computing. And I talked to Mira to try to figure it out. Basically, we had a beginning balance fund that got carried over of roughly $490,000 because we didn't do street projects the year before. So we had a little bit of contingency that we were building up so that we'd be able to do more street projects the following year. So that's where that $400,000 void actually fits in. And Mira provided a nice memo note. I think it's on page 28 or 29 of your packets that explains that beginning fund balance that we were lacking from the details, and that carried over. So that was the only question that we were left lingering from the financials last go round, I believe. And with her explanation, I was pretty content with that figure afterwards.
So her memo starts on page 29 for those if they want to look in the packet. Do we have any questions or comments for Mike? Does everyone need a minute to kind of review? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Is this just about the memo? Because I have questions about the budget real quick.
Go ahead. Financials, not a budget, but.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you. I feel like I've asked this question before, so maybe I need to put on my listening ears for the answer. Under city council, I see an adjustment of $11,000 for special department expenses. What is that money? What do we use that money for?
Public outreach, any sort of the newsletter that we sent out, conferences, travel.
Okay, so I guess I'm wondering why we need to add that, like, that's a lot more to add.
Sure. The newsletter, we didn't budget for the newsletter, and that costs about $7,000 to $8,000.
Okay,
And there's, what page is that on?
it's on just the very last page under the revisions that show what we had adopted, what we want to adjust.
Is that the supplemental?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wait, that's the next one.
We're not on that one yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
We're
look at me
on-
going out of order. How fun is that?
We're on the June 2021 financials.
We're just
But-
gonna table my question.
Yeah, but my answer remains the same. It's because of that newsletter and stuff that costs like.
So I
$7,000.
literally did probably ask this in June. So I've heard the answer because I'm having deja vu. Okay, thanks
All right.
everybody.
Other questions? Looking around, I see no raised hands. All right. Are we ready there for a motion? That's an invitation for someone to put a motion on the table.
I motion to approve the, what are we calling it? Financial 2021 financial statement?
It's the June.
June 2021.
June 2021 financials, yeah. Do we have
Okay.
a second?
Who was the second? Was that Micah or Dave?
Dave.
Dave.
All right. Raise your hand if you,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7-0. Yes.
all right, the motion carries. All right, the next agenda item is now Resolution R-2021-11. And here, the resolution allowing a supplemental budget increase and decrease pursuant to ORS 294.338, providing for the receipt, appropriations and expenditures of unexpected funds. Here we have to hold a public hearing, discuss and approve or disapprove a supplemental budget. So here, Mike, do I have to open the public hearing?
Yes. So this is basically a supplemental budget. You can take testimony on the budget if you desire. I think the public hearing is actually the supplemental budget being presented to the council.
Okay,
But you could take testimony on the budget if there's any concerns or worries, complaints, any of that jazz.
okay,
You'll
so,
see this has the ARPA funds rolled in. We did have a carryover budget adjustment to our bottom line of about $300,000 from last year to the positive side. So we put most of that into contingencies and spread it out throughout the rest of the funds. Nothing really too exciting here that you haven't seen before, really. So I'd be happy to answer any questions for you. But it's pretty benign, really.
I guess the procedural rules would be questions first before I open the public hearing, right? Because the public hearing is comments for, against, or, right?
Yeah, I think this is a resolution, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but it's pertaining to the budget, so it has to go through the budget hearing process or
Okay, so first, does anyone have any comments or questions about this budget? Has everyone had a chance to read it? Do you have questions?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I just want a little more clarification as to what these figures represent. Are these figures in the past, Mike? Because it says 2021 to 2022, which makes me think it's not figures in the past, or explain that. I'm sorry.
So what we do is as we get closer throughout the budget year, we'll take looks quarterly at where we sit. if we are approaching, so as you see in the financials, there's that like percentage of how close we are to budget actual. That basically is like an indicator light for us. And so as that is in the middle and we're reading the percentages, say we're in September, so we're first quarter, we want to see those numbers right around 25%. If we see one of those numbers like tracking at about 50 to 75%, we know that we're probably going to go over toward the end of the year. So it requires a budget adjustment for us to be able to spend those funds and keep in line with the budget. So what a supplemental budget is it's just revisiting the original budget document and coming back to the council for authorization to adjust those funds so that we can spend those monies throughout the year. So some of these were probably spent within the last month. Others we're projecting are going to be spent throughout the next 6 to 7 months before the end of the fiscal year, which is going to be June 30th.
Okay, you will explain really well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Other questions or comments? All right, so at this time, I will open it up for public hearing. We will take statements from our participant or from our attendees. We don't have too many, so if anyone wishes to speak, now is your opportunity to throw a comment in the chat and say you would like to speak.
Or raise your hand.
Or raise your hand. I don't want to cut anyone off, but we do have very limited attendees tonight.
Hearing none.
Hearing none, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And then at this time, do we have to set it for motion tonight, or do we have to kick it out to next? Okay, so then we entertain a motion to, I'll entertain the motion on the supplemental.
I motion to approve the supplemental budget for fiscal year 2021 to 2022.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, raise your hand.
I got unanimous.
Okay. Motion carries. All right, moving on to 2022 election information. Discussion only. And Mike, I will give it over to you, or Ronnie.
I think this is more Ronnie's bailiwick, but for election information, we are coming into an election year, and that means that those of you that will be running for office will need to get your packets going again here come in the month of May, and all that wonderful stuff. We also have a couple of things going on today, but I think we were going to cover that in council discussion, if I'm not mistaken, right, Ronnie?
Or we could, if you want to talk about it now. I mean,
What are we talking about? Remind me. I'm sorry.
So you have in here election discussion.
Right.
Would you mind expounding on what exactly you wanted us to discuss in this?
Oh, yeah. So it's just, so I can't tell you all individually. I have to tell you all in a public office that we have 4 positions coming up in 2022. And that is Ken Gibson, Dave Platt, Smart, Jamie Fender, and one other, Micah Polson. And so I just real quickly, these open up June 1st, and it will go until August 30th for the papers to be filed. So there's your public announcement for elections for 2022.
okay.
That's it.
All right. Anyone have questions? I think we all know the gist, right? So then we're just going to move on. Eviction moratorium.
I actually have Smart has his hand up. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Smart. I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
Nope, I didn't see it until now either.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened, but sorry, no, my hand is not up. I don't know how that.
Oh, okay, that was just an
I
accident.
got it.
Right,
And it blends in with your background wall.
it does. All right, so we're gonna move on to the eviction moratorium discussion. Mike, tell us about the moratorium.
So, this is a 90-day eviction moratorium expansion on the authorities of the governor. You know, there was a memo that our legal counsel put out with some where he laid out some concerns about going along with this. It does put us at risk, if you will, or at least risk of liability should a property owner sue the city for damages, essentially. I think it's a little different when it's Washington County, or it's definitely different when it's coming from the governor's office or the state of Oregon, because the governor has that authority and also has the ability to provide funds to support that moratorium. My concern is moving forward with this 90-day moratorium order, if you will, that we put ourselves at risk. And I think that was our attorney's advice as well. That being said, some other cities have done it. Tualatin did it. I believe Beaverton and Hillsborough have done it. Tigard had a different model. I don't think it was as effective, and Washington County wasn't very fond of it. So it's a good thing to think about, a good thing to do. It's a feel-good move, I think, but it also has the possibility of putting us at some legal liability.
Mike, do we have any statistics on the number of residential foreclosures within King City, or what that rate looks like? Or I do know the last time I looked at this statistic, I know we have a high percentage of homeowners compared to some of the other cities, but I candidly, I mean, I think it's hard because of COVID, but I would kind of want to see a bit more information given a kind of legal warning. I think I'm not opposed to it. I definitely want to protect our citizens, especially during COVID. I mean, they're so vulnerable, and no one should be evicting right now, in my opinion. But I think I personally would want more information before taking any action. I don't know what other people are feeling, but.
What were those things that you pointed out earlier? Eviction rates, and what was the other?
Yeah, I would probably want to look at eviction, maybe the last 10 years or 7 years of what the eviction rates were in King City. If that's easy to get, if it's a huge calculation, then just the last recent years, percentage of ownership, home ownership. And I would love a refresher on kind of our income, our income levels in King City. I think that's important to look at, because there's other community, I have no idea if our community is high risk for evictions or low risk for eviction. I only have my anecdotal thoughts on that, but I would rather see the data so that I can have a more informed decision about that. And I don't know graphically, I don't know how the information is digestible to us, but I would love to kind of understand geographically as well. But that's just mine. Anyone else have thoughts or questions?
So my question, if we don't have a moratorium, if we don't support a moratorium, what happens to the residents of King City? Where's their protection? And if there's no protection at the state level, would there be protection at the county level? If we are not stepping up and saying we have a moratorium, what happens to those residents? Where's their protection is the question that I have.
It would have to come from the state, essentially. Washington County's authority basically would stop at our city boundary, I believe. And that was my understanding. I think that's why Washington County wants us to pass it. I think us and Tigard and maybe a couple other small holes here and there are gaps in their maps, and they're looking for a map coverage of the entire Washington County region.
Okay. So if we have a moratorium in place and the funding to support these folks who are faced with this kind of situation, is the state supporting that financially? No, because they don't have a moratorium.
Correct.
So I'm still not understanding. And if we do have a moratorium in place, what does that do?
Well, essentially, it would put us in a position.
Landlord could sue the city
Yeah,
for,
sue the city to
Right.
on the eviction.
Yeah, I'm talking about I'm talking about the protection for the resident.
right.
Where does this moratorium, how does this protect them just by having this in place? Well, we don't have any funds to keep them
Right.
in their homes. Where would that funding come from to support this idea that they can't be evicted? I'm really not understanding that.
I think that was our concern as well, Ken, when I was talking to Peter, it's, who's going to reimburse the landowner when
Right.
the tenant's not paying them for their monthly rent, and then they
Exactly.
don't have legal recourse because we've taken the law away from them. Now we are the ones that are causing harm or damages to the landowner. So
Right.
now we're legally liable for the loss of damages. For loss.
And we don't have the funds to support it. So once we say, landlord, you can't evict this resident of King City, I'm just not sure this is a good policy one way or another. And it seems like it's baseless words for us to have it in place when in reality we have no support financially for anyone involved.
I think, Ken, also, I would be curious to see what CIS's opinion of this is. Because I think I mean, I'm not necessarily saying go get an official opinion from them written up or anything, but,
Right.
you know, we have to kind of always remember that if we're sued, we have, right, the city has insurance. However, if there's a lot that goes into that. And so if we contravene a legal opinion, I would be interested to see what CIS's opinion of specifically this, right? I mean, they can't tell us what policy to do or not do, but if we're that concerned about it. The other component, I would say, having formally done eviction court for many years, is just because a landlord can evict someone right now does not necessarily mean that the court is going to automatically grant it and it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There is a ton, the eviction courts in all courts around the state of Oregon require landlords and tenants to mediate before the court will even, right? So you go to court, they make you go to mediation. And, you know, I don't even know if Washington County is enforcing them in the court system, right? So,
well, when the governor had an emergency order in place, it was real clear that everybody had to abide by that. Mm-hmm. And that the landlords were just told, you can't do this. And at some point in time, there was also conversation about funding that was going to be available to help them recover, right? So I don't know how we do it.
Well, that's the other thing is if we're, you know, landlords not getting their rents so that they can then pay their mortgages because there's not a moratorium on mortgages, right? I mean, then you're talking about potentially people losing their livelihood and losing their home. I mean, losing the rental home, and it's not a favorable decision because I mean, it's not a favorable opinion because renters obviously need probably a little more protection than landlords do, but it's complicated. And I think,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I'm willing to do, I think we as a city, we want to do the right thing. But I don't know what the right thing is in this situation, to have a moratorium in place. What does that really mean? Who is that helping? And how is it supported? So I think we really need to think this through. And Mike, you said that some other cities have moratoriums in place. Do you know what the detail of that is?
Well, I think Tigers has a eviction moratorium. Walton has an eviction ban. I think Washington County had a 90-day eviction ban. And that was like 30 days ago. So they're probably like, I think by the time we hack out all the legal details, their eviction ban is going to be up unless they extend it again. And I think what they're trying to do is pressure the governor's office. And that's where it should come from, to be honest with you. This should be coming from the governor's office, because that's the only office that really has the authority to enforce and put forth something of this size and nature.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I think they're trying to show unity amongst the community by passing this and showing a kind of like an olive branch or showing of support for these that are impoverished and on the verge of losing their home. And granted, like Councilor Fender said, this is no time to be evicting anybody at this point.
Right. So if we just are simply making a statement to show support of those folks who are on the cusp of being evicted, it's just a show of support. But the legal detail and how you actually prevent them from being evicted is not clear. So, from a resident's perspective, for King City to say, we support the idea of not being evicted, but the ultimate backing probably does need to come from the state. I don't know. Okay, I've kind of made this a longer conversation maybe than it needs to be, but I'm not feeling it. I mean, I just don't understand the benefit of doing it. I can also understand at the same time the concern for not doing it.
Yeah. And anyone else have thoughts? Shauna?
Well, I was just gonna say, I'm just looking at Washington County's website, and they have a really good page on it with a lot of great information and resources for the public, for rental assistance, tenant resources. I'm wondering if we can if we don't already have a link to this on the King City website, it could be helpful for people that are struggling to pay their rent. And there's about if you need mortgage assistance and or foreclosure counseling. So if you want, I can put this link in the chat and maybe
that would be helpful. I think all of us should have it at our fingers in case we get contacted by anyone and we can help, right? There is, just so everyone is aware, that every county has free housing counseling for homeowners, and housing counseling is phenomenal because they do a lot with like first-time homeowners and people who need to learn how to budget better and all that stuff. And they're really wonderful. So if you do have someone that's struggling, or they're saying, I'm struggling so much, I'm worried that I might get into foreclosure, the housing counselors are, because they're HUD approved, and it's a safe zone, because unfortunately foreclosure is an area that has immense scams in it, and it's very sad. So all right, I think we are going to move on unless anyone else has a burning discussion burning comment or concern to raise. I see none, so we're going to move on. So Chief Pamphila, where are you? I don't see you. Are you ready for your report, Chief?
It's my turn.
It is your turn. You're up. It only took us an hour and 32 minutes.
Sorry, I just woke me up. But
you're done eating?
What? You were sleeping through my voice? Are you kidding?
So just for tonight, I'll make it quick again with some staff changes that are going on. So Officer Pat Dean is retiring at the end of this month. So his last day with us is November 27th. So if you see him, wish him well and congratulations on surviving this career. And I have made an offer to another officer that would be new to Oregon. He had a career in corrections in California. And so he is in the process. We're in a background with him right now, and then medical and psych coming up. So hopefully that goes well and we can get him on board probably sometime after the first of the year. And that will basically, it keeps the status quo. We're still going to be way behind. You know, we got John Huffman, who should be done with the academy in December, I think around Christmas, and then he'll be out with the coach for several months. And then if everything works out with our other job offer, he would be, the academies are so far and few between right now, he wouldn't make an academy visit until April. And so he would be out with someone for a couple of months, getting some pre-academy work in, and then academy work, which again is 16 weeks, it's forever. And so he wouldn't be out on his own probably until this time next year. So there'll be a lot of work that Brian and I will still be doing out on the road. So any questions or concerns, feel free to let me know. Stop by anytime. Give me a call. Because Brian and I'll be there. We're there, a lot. Right? 7 days a week. We've recovered in 7 days. So anything you guys have, just go ahead and let us know. That's all I got.
Thanks, Ernie.
I have a quick question, Ernie.
Yep.
You mentioned someone that you have provided a job offer, but then you meant, was it the same person you talked about twice? Is there only one?
No, there's actually a different one. I
Okay.
always stop short of using the name of the person. We'll call him Kevin. And so Kevin has been made a job offer, and then the other person I was speaking of is John Huffman, who is in the academy right now. He's got about 5-6 weeks left in the academy. So when you see him, the big age difference, they're, one's 23, and I think Kevin is actually older than me. So so we're moving along.
So Kevin would be going to academy in April.
That's our hope. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
So Ernie, at this point, you feel optimistic?
On Kevin?
All over.
Well,
yes
yeah,
or no?
Yeah, optimistic and tired, and stuff. So, get me out there. I'm working a lot more actually, which is good for me. But we're optimistic. We feel like we've turned a corner, and it's just going to be, it's time. It can't happen fast enough, but we have to be patient and just let these things, train people the proper way and do things the way that they need to be done. And then obviously come into King City and learn our unique city and our way of policing and our ethos of, no calls too small. It's just, it's a different place. And so they'll just run into calls here that they won't run into anywhere else. And so it's just learning that and just coming out here and having fun, right? We got to get back into the fun part of this.
Yes, I hope you guys can do it soon.
Smart, I saw you raising.
Yes, we have an update on the vehicles. So I know we're talking about the vehicles in the past. Any update on that? Some of them were aging and all. Talk about that during the budget, and then the cameras that we're talking about. So any updates on those two, please? Thank you.
So my computer broke a little bit there. I got cameras at the end. I missed the first part. If somebody can help me out with that.
So the vehicles, we're talking about them aging in the past, and we're thinking about replacing them, and we had plans. And
okay, so on the cars, so on the cars, I know we have one car that's budgeted for a purchase this year. We'll have to see where we're at with that. You know, as long as we're online with budget and everything like that, I think we should be able to pick up one more car. What it's going to be, I'm not sure, because honestly, like everything else on the planet, supply is horrible. And so it could be, you know, looking at an alternative, because I know Mike and I talked about, you know, maybe we go to a Tahoe like what I drive, although I've got the oldest car in the fleet, but, you know, whether it's a Tahoe, because the Tahoe and Explorer prices are now almost identical. Explorer's jumped up in price quite a bit. And then of course it costs, once I buy the car, it costs about $12,000 to $15,000 to outfit it on top of that. So it gets pretty expensive. And as far as cameras, we just finally last week received the body cams. And so there's a couple of things there with the body cams that have to be done. One is, and I know that they're going to work a little bit on it tomorrow, is both the Taser 7 and the body cams are on this same system, where it talks to Axon. It talks to this, basically this evidence-based cloud. And our ability to speak from the cloud to this evidence system is not working well. And so I know that there's going to be a carrier jump that we have to do. And then there's also now there's a new state law that's been passed about evidence being turned over in a very short period of time on crimes that are charged by the district attorney's office. And so with that comes video redaction. So there's going to be times that like Brian and I have to get in and redact video to be turned over to the DA's office and to defense attorneys. And so there's a big learning curve, a lot that he and I have to learn. And so it could be several months before we see stuff. Hopefully it's quicker than that, but it could be several months because we also have a policy we have to look at. And there's a policy that, you know, I will be very open to show you guys to take a look at it, and obviously be vetted by attorneys as well, because there is some information out there, and there's been some change in some policies that I've seen, and especially with Lexipol, which we're a part of and moving towards. And so that there's some language in there where we're starting to protect a little bit more stuff and redact some more things that deal with tactics, that deal with HIPAA information that may be talked about, that deals with policy information, you know, to where there's just a lot of stuff that all of a sudden has popped up. And so it's a new tool. It's incredibly sophisticated. And there are things that these video body cams can do. Like I can seriously, from where I'm sitting right now in Scappoose, if I had an incident happen in King City, I could punch into this app and I can watch what's happening live on my computer. I mean, that's how cool this stuff is. And so there's just an amazing amount of stuff to do it. And believe me, as everybody's going to laugh because they know I am the most incompetent computer person on the planet.
Everyone can learn, Ernie.
It's a chance that I've got to just learn this and become an expert at it really fast. Right. And so there's a little window, but I'm hoping that, you know, it's sooner than later, but it is going to be a few months before we can get out there. And the other thing too, is just with how we're staffed currently, it's going to be tough to roll it out as quickly as possible, just because Brian and I are, you know, we're calls for service and doing every other day to day operation deal, but we finally got them. And so that's the cool part is, and I know they're wiring up some stuff tomorrow and trying to get us to where we talk better to that infamous bug that we talk about. And so hopefully it's sooner than later.
Thank you. I think both Kate and I want to go on the record. Ernie, Kate would like the King City Police Department to create a Mountie kind of arm. And so I think a horse would be good. And then I think we need a golf cart. So please try to work on that for the budget for next year.
Well, I've got two side-by-sides that the city is more than welcome to purchase from me. One's more expensive than the other. And I'm actually buying a horse this year for my son, who's actually, it's for me, my family. My son is becoming a steer wrestler. And so, you know, we're getting into that sort of thing. So,
oh my gosh, I already
opportunity.
the next parade, Ernie, is going to be phenomenal. All right, We're gonna move on. Mike Weston, give us your city manager update, please.
Well, they're still working on the parks and natural trails bond out of Metro. So I sat in a meeting last night till about 5:30, 6 o'clock on that. Just discussing how that's going to be dispersed and what are going to be the main priorities. Mostly they're looking at property acquisition and connecting holes and gaps in the trail system region-wide. So I think we have a local share of that. I think it's something, I want to say about $600,000 or $700,000 that we can use out of that portion. Might be a little bit more. I can't remember the exact number, but I did have it not too long ago that I shared. Sat in a meeting with MTAC this morning, viewed some of the presentations from the other communities that are doing the urban growth boundary expansions. Speaking of urban growth boundary expansions, the Supreme Court of Oregon has rejected the appeal by housing land advocates. So that is now a done deal now on appeals, unless they're going to try to appeal it to the US Supreme Court. But right now it looks like everything's pretty much done. So that's an update. Other update, I think I told you guys last month that Metro had granted us additional CET funds, construction excise tax funds, in the amount of $130,000 to do a look at the east-west transportation analysis. We're expecting the intergovernmental agreement to come through over the next couple of days. We haven't seen it yet, but we are expecting it. We are also expecting a draft of the transportation system plan this Friday is what we've been told. So hopefully we'll get a draft from DKS this Friday. We'll start review. We'll probably have a week of review time. I think we have to have our comments back to ODOT by like November 30th, perhaps, to wrap that up. So we're going to be trying to get all that done. Let's see what else. Ernie already mentioned that we have an officer that's retiring, but we have another in the wings that hopefully everything goes according to plan. We're able to bring him on in the near future. The park is looking pretty good. I went down there with all the rain that we had over this last session, and if anyone's been down by the riverfront, it's moved back like that. Deer Creek has definitely eroded back some more at the head, like it's head cutting pretty far. Now it's probably about 5-6 feet away from the little wood bridge that somebody put in there. So we have seen that occurring down there. Otherwise, everything looks in pretty good shape. Passport office is open. We were really busy last Friday. It's been pretty consistent throughout the week. I think everyone's getting ready for the holidays, and I'm sure there's going to be some very happy faces toward the end of this month when we do some employee essential pay. So
awesome. Any questions for Mike? Okay. All right, Mike. Awesome. All right, Mayor, we're gonna head to you, Mayor, because I've done all the talking, so we need to hear from you because we miss your voice.
Well, I'm glad you're doing all the talking. It's absolutely wonderful. Just one thing, and I think this is important, and I'm going to pull Dave Platt into this conversation as well. This is when Dave and I officially announced our retirement from public service. We are going to be with you guys for the entire month of December, but at the January council meeting, that will be our exit stage left. And we're both excited and sad. I'm speaking on Dave's behalf too on this. We're excited and sad. I have been retired from United Airlines for 15 years, but I've been doing business for King City for 13 of those 15 years. So I really don't know what retirement really looks like. So I'm going to find that out this time. I'm really going to find out what retirement really feels like. But I know that with my exit and with Dave's exit, this council is in really, really good hands. You guys are going to see it to the finish line. And I have all the confidence in the world that as a resident of King City, I'm going to be totally satisfied with the performance of this council. And I promise you that I will refrain from getting on a Zoom call and giving you guys a bad time about any decision you make. Okay? I'll make that commitment to you. So you guys are wonderful and I appreciate you so much. So, can I turn it over to Dave? Because I think Dave,
Sure.
Kind of threw him under the bus on this. But
Sure, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. I echo some of what you said. I retired in 1997. And then I retired again about 5 years after that. And now I'm still on one other board besides being on city council. And I haven't been retired yet. So I am kind of looking forward to it at this point. After a while, you feel like it's time to pass it on to some younger blood.
Oh. Well, I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to serve with you both. And Ken, your leadership over all these years is going to be sorely missed. But the nice thing about living in a small community is we know how to reach you, and we will always find ways to rope you back in a little bit, right? So
I know how to not answer my phone.
So we'll have to plan a little something. Mike or Ronnie, why don't you kind of walk through kind of procedurally kind of what that means, what needs to happen, and kind of what's the landscape then in response to all that?
So I think first step, and Ronnie has already started putting together a notice for it, but we'll put out an announcement that we have a couple open positions on the council and that we're accepting applications for that. Typically, we'll leave it open for about a month, 30 days. At the end of the 30 days, the window closes, and then the council will conduct interviews. And within the next meeting or the meeting after, the council can either have discussion and then wait a meeting, or they can have discussion if they feel confident. They can appoint at that point in time, or they can wait a week, or not a week, but till the next hearing, and then vote at that point in time. So,
okay. All right. So I guess I think our time frame is going to be kind of dependent on when you guys post the announcements, right? Because I think 30 days, getting 30 days out there is probably the requirement, I would assume, right, Ronnie?
So there is no requirement.
Oh, okay.
Technically, it's just it was just a policy that we made up in 2017. So I have it scheduled to be published tomorrow.
Okay.
On our website, the times. Yeah, the times tomorrow, as long as I get it before noon, and then it closes December 17th, 2021.
Okay. And then when is our council meeting in December?
So the 15th.
Okay. So I think what would be I guess we can't really invite people to the council meeting on this, on December 15th to speak if we still have a couple days open. So
Yeah, no, so
yeah.
I kind of played with some of the dates. I kind of threw in December 29th, and January 5th, and January 19th. So, I mean.
So I
kind of
think
up to you guys.
just having gone through lots of these prior, I think what makes the most sense is to figure out interviews before the January council meeting and then be in a position to make a decision at the council meeting. That also that council meeting, we need to do the executive, executive appointments, officers, right? And then I think it would be, I would love to have, and I guess I'm still a little confused as to what purpose of the executive sessions we can go, but I would love in that January meeting to have a kind of a goal discussion, executive session, so I'll follow up with Ronnie with kind of what, some type of like, or maybe in February, we need to do that because we need to do, so never mind.
So usually in February, or I'm sorry, January, we do the appointments for the mayor and the offices. And then in February, we do a goal setting.
Okay, good. Okay, so I just want to make sure, because I feel like we missed one year, or it happened really late. It happened like.
Yeah, it happened really late.
It happened really late. Make sure
it was very late.
It's also good to do goal setting when you have an idea what the budget's going to look like.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Listen here, you guys. I'm going to sign off. It's been real. I'm hungry now, so I'm gonna go.
You're not retired yet, so
I'm practicing.
And
will you let me practice? I'm trying to get used to how to do this. Okay. So I'm going to sign off now and love you all. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah.
Okay.
Dave, you're stuck with us for a little bit longer. No, I'm kidding. All right. Let's do counselor reports, and let's do Micah first.
Nothing to report this month. We did not have a PAB meeting in October, and our November meeting is tomorrow. And then we have an upcoming small cities meeting in December. That's all I have upcoming. I will have more to report next month.
Awesome. Smart.
Yes, so I got the recording for the water board meeting. And then I was listening to the recording and they were like, oh, there's a strange number. We don't know who that number is. And I was like, that was me. I was the one I was just waiting for them to let me in and no one let me in the meeting. So I didn't listen to it. So nothing to worry about. The rains are back. So no concerns about water level and all of that. So nothing serious to report there. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Smart. We need to tell the water board that, you're there and listening, like let you in, right?
We have a strange number.
Well, thank you. All right, Kate.
I don't have any updates. The SHS was something that we kind of went over with the impact meeting, but we've had a comprehensive presentation there. So I don't have much else to say.
Okay, great. Shauna?
I have nothing to report this month.
Awesome. Dave?
I think I probably reported already.
Okay, nothing to add then?
Nothing there.
Oh, Dave, we're gonna miss you, but Ken, we're gonna rope you back in. Don't worry. We'll put you to work. It's my grand scheme. As for me, so I shadowed the mayor at the MCC kind of training last weekend, and that's the Metro, the MMC, excuse me, Metro Mayors Consortium. And that was kind of like a day-long meeting, and it was really fascinating because the discussion was about kind of onboarding new mayors and kind of updating and kind of updating their bylaws and how to ensure kind of equity and diversity and inclusion. And it was just a really fascinating meeting to kind of be a fly on the wall at. So that was great. I met with Kevin Barton to kind of talk about the upcoming landscape of the DA's office and kind of what's been happening in Washington County about crime. And of course, it's an election year, right? So there's all of that. And then in other news, I think that's kind of, I'm sorry. The biggest news I have. So I kind of touched upon this last month, but I didn't get too much time to talk about it. But as we know, there is an issue with pickup and drop off traffic at Deer Creek on 131. And it seems to go, it was horrific the first couple of weeks. And I think that we can chalk a lot of that up to returning to school, and there's a huge bus driver shortage. There's more parents driving their kids, all of that. So the traffic was one thing. One of the things that has kind of developed is really unsafe drivers doing just crazy things like driving on the sidewalk, like taking U-turns across the median and driving on the opposite sidewalk. And it's just, I have talked to a lot of people in the community. I've talked to Jarvis Gomez, who was the former principal at Deer Creek and is now head of safety in Tigard-Tualatin School District. I've talked to Ms. Waffles, who is the current principal at Deer Creek. And I've reached out to several parents who have been probably the most vocal in frustration, I think. And I've put together kind of I want to put together, I've invited all of those individuals along with Ernie and Brian to kind of form a task force to address some of the traffic issues. Candidly, it can be a King City problem because you're dealing with private property. You're dealing with a school district, right? If you think about if getting volunteers to do traffic control there, right? Our police department does not have the capacity. They certainly are there when they can, but that is not a solution that is sustainable. And so really we kind of need some buy-in from everyone if there's something to do, right? And I think there's a lot of different of opinions, but candidly, there's only a few real options available. And so I'd like to at least just kind of start talking about some of those options. And I think from the school's perspective, it's really about educating the parents on how to do pick up and drop off appropriately. And that component of it is not a city issue. And I think if it becomes, it's a really complicated problem because the drastic solution, which will serve, is going to be the solution that all of King City residents are going to hate the most. And that is making the turn lane out of Deer Creek right turn only during pickup and drop off to allow for a faster flow of cars to come out of there. And while I don't mind being the poster of difficult decisions in King City, I certainly have held myself out to that before. I think we really need to have some conversations, right? So one of the questions is, are the parents who are the most, are parents willing to learn how to become traffic flaggers and volunteer? And, we'll see. So anyway, anyone who wants to kind of join in those efforts, if you are passionate about talking about them, again, I'm kind of spearheading this, not necessarily as a role for King City, although I think we need to be bought into that, but it's kind of as a role of a parent, right? But anyway, so for right now, it's a discussion and an exchange of ideas, right? And but I will say, I walk my kids every day to Deer Creek, and every day I see crazy drivers, and I think, you know, we like to think that it's not people who live in our community, but it is. And I completely, this idea that now, while I don't think it's everyone in our community is doing it, I think the reality is they are. And at some point, people just need to calm down and, you know, and I know this is going to be a really unfavorable position, but if we had a better egress out of the city and we had a better connectivity of roads, we would have alternatives to drive and we wouldn't have this problem. So it's not something that a lot of people want to hear, but the reality is when you only have a bottleneck situation of traffic, then you're going to have bottlenecks when there's a traffic issue. And I do not, again, this is not a popular opinion, but I do not have sympathy for people who are frustrated in being stuck in the traffic. While it's absolutely annoying, and I commiserate, the safety of our kids trumps any irritation that anyone has in standing in line. However, I am very concerned with the wackadoodles driving on the sidewalk and pulling U-turns. So I just want to make it clear that it's not people who are complaining at me that, you know, because there's a traffic issue. It's not the traffic issue. It's the safety that some people are choosing. And it's so unsafe right in the school zone. So I know Ernie had looked at, we had talked about putting up road signs earlier, maybe even on Fisher, that says heavy congestion ahead during school or something like that. One of those reader boards, right? To kind of deter anyone who's cutting through on Fisher. But candidly, you know, while I'm sure there's a few cut throughs, it's people who live in our community, you know, it just is. That's just the reality. So if you want to, I'm trying to get a Zoom together. So if you want to join, then let me know. And Shauna, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, two things. One, I feel like it's gotten better in the last
I totally agree.
weeks. Yeah. I don't know. Mm-hmm. A lot better than in the beginning of the school year. So that's positive. Maybe we can make this an agenda item and on an upcoming meeting, and we can brainstorm between now and then, and we can bring some ideas to the table, because there are, I'm sure, many different solutions, some easy, some difficult. But I think it's an important topic to discuss because it is a huge safety issue. So I would love to make it an agenda item.
I'd love to do that. I'd also, who do we need to talk to about getting a crosswalk at Beef Bend? I know that's not county. I mean, I know it's county, but who can we contact to encourage to put that higher on the list?
Going north.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they're working on that, and with safe routes to school. We've been in on that as well. City of Tigard, actually Tigard Tualatin School District is working on that in conjunction with she's I'm trying to remember what her name is. She actually is a King City resident that lives over there off of is it Buchanan, south of Dixon, in the new division there, and I'm just drawing a blank right now. But she works in the public information office of Tigard and has been working with safe routes to school for a couple of years now, trying to get that crossing across Beef Bend there. So get a crosswalk across Beef Bend.
The other thing, sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Are they putting a sidewalk in on the north side of Beef Bend then?
Crosswalk. I don't think we're looking at putting a sidewalk in that area because it's still unincorporated. So you'd have to get down to like Peachville or so before you could cross over.
but it just crosses the road and then it's no sidewalk on that side of the road.
Yeah, because it's outside of King City and Tigard's jurisdiction. It's a Washington County street. So he
I
would
don't know
need
if I
to
want
be-
people to cross the road there when there's no sidewalk to receive them.
Right.
Okay.
True, and then they walk that little dirt trail along the drainage ditch on the north side. So it's a terrible situation. It needs to be addressed. And one of the things that we've talked about doing is the like a tri-oval down there by Peachville and 137th and that as well. And one of the traffic outlets for 131st is 137th. So if Fisher ever connects over to 137th, then it's, problem solved, because then people have another outlet to get out of the Edgewater community instead of 131st. So it's like Councilor Fender was saying, like it's a bottleneck problem essentially, because there's no other outlet. So
the other question, and we can add this, I think, later, and maybe we can just do a bigger umbrella of like traffic and crosswalking safety or something, but I think we really need a crosswalk on Fisher, kind of, south of the 131, but that's just my opinion. I don't know to paint it. I'm not talking about like a lit one with a stop it, but just a little stripe. So we can kind of south. So north of the, I need a map. North of the, is it Royal Villas? What's the manufactured home? Is that Royal Villa?
mobile home Mountain View Estates, or
No, on Fisher. So
Colorado.
El Dorado, right? Just so north of El Dorado, right there, just seems like so many people cross over from, or maybe it's at El Dorado. I tell you what, I will do this next time I drive, because it's just an area that I see people crossing all the time, and maybe it's El Dorado, maybe it's right there. But
yeah, just past 124th, there's a bus stop there.
Oh, maybe that's why I just see people crossing all the time, and like not too far away is that just that little tiny bend, and I don't know. Anyway, all right. Any other? Did I miss anyone? I don't think I've missed anyone. I don't believe we're going into executive session tonight, and I don't have anything else. I hope you all have a very wonderful Thanksgiving. I got my kids their first dose of vaccine, and we are flying on Saturday to Palm Springs for 10 days, and I cannot wait. So I may or may not have turkey. We might just barbecue at the pool. So we shall see. But if you celebrate Thanksgiving, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving. If you don't, I wish you a wonderful week. And I think, Mike, unless there's anything else that you need to throw at us, I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Everyone, raise your hand if you want to leave. All right. Have a wonderful night. Happy holidays, and we shall see you next.
Thank you.
Bye,
Take care, guys. Have a great one.
You.
Bye.
Thank you, Ronnie.